Hello guys, my name is Jamali Francis and this is Jamali Francis Archi Instinct, and today we're going to be speaking about concepts. So what is a concept? Firstly, a concept is an idea that is developed from an individual and has some form of background behind it, if you get on, in the architectural sense. So what I'm going to be speaking to you guys about today is how to be innovative and develop a good architectural concept. So the first thing is there are four key points that you gotta put in when you're developing your concept, which is one, site analysis, two, design brief, three, narrative, and four, the complexity. So the first thing is the site analysis. You guys are probably looking at this as, what is all of this information? So let me break it down for you. When you're making a site analysis, you want to make sure the site is the first thing that is viewed. I will have a video out on my channel next week about what is needed to make an overall site analysis. But I'm going to briefly explain to you guys what is needed when making a site analysis. So a site analysis contains things that you go and collect from the area when going to look at the site. So for example, we've gone and look at this. This is one of my projects from first year, and we've gone and looked at the site, and these are some of the things that we picked up. So we picked up the street patterns and the hierarchy. So which streets are more busy than others in the area, how the crime rate works in the area, the land use, the history, the topography and climate of the area, the sun path and the rotation. This is just some of the basic things that you need. Later on, you will then go on to learn about TPOs, which are teeth protection orders, and how trees can affect areas. You'll learn about neighboring buildings, opposite dwellings. You learn about lots of other stuff, but on a basic level, site analysis, this is the things that you look these are the things that you want to look for when you're on site. So some of the basic things that you want to look for when you're on site. The next thing is some of the main things that you want to look for on site, which are the constraints, the features, and the characteristics. Go straight off. Constraint. What are constraints? Constraints are things that could cause a problem when you want to undergo work. So for example, there might be damage in the area that could cause problems. For example, it might be a flood risk area. For example, there might be a very windy area. When if you're looking into making solar panels, there might not be enough sun in that area. So those are some of the key things that you want to look for. The next thing is the features. What features do the area hold? So when you go and do a site analysis, you want to look at the features. For example, what's around? What is around? What's in the area? Like what does it hold? Does it hold? Is it a very built up area? Is it not that built? Do they have a lot of schools around? Do they have a lot of shops around? Do they have police stations, or is it just full of homes? So these are some of the things that you want to look at. And then lastly, the characteristic of the area. So you want to see, is it a very quiet area? Do you hear nothing? Do you see a lot of green space? Do you want to do you see things? For example, do you hear people talking all the time? Do you hear a lot of cars? You see, like, is there a lot of nature? You got to look and see what sort of vibe the site is giving. And these are plain open things that you can mark down when actually on site. You can't do this over the internet. It doesn't tell you, oh yeah, it's very noisy here, or it's very windy. You have to actually go on site and view these things. The next thing that we're going to look at is a brief. So the brief is extremely important when creating a concept. Look at a brief as a checklist of what the client wants and what is required. In a brief, you should find schemes, programs, areas, dimensions, circulation, relationship of spaces. I'll do a video showing you guys how to dissect a brief, because there are a lot of things in a brief which you have to look into. The brief can have a major impact on the development of your concept. For example, here is one of my briefs from first year. As you can see, it shows the minimum requirements inside the house. So it shows the rooms that the client wants, the considerations, you want the bedroom to have a... So these are just things that the client wants and what is required. So you know what you're going to have to do, what you're going to have to put into your plans. Briefs can contain of several things, like the plan of the area. You're very fortunate if you get that. You can get drawings from the actual client, or you can get drawings from a previous architect maybe that hasn't finished the work exactly. So there are several things that you can look into when you're doing the brief, but all in all, you want to make sure that you break it down as much as possible so you're getting the same picture as the client. You don't want to create something that the client doesn't want. So you want to make sure that you go all out when you get the brief and make sure you take in that information properly. The brief, what you're technically doing is research on everything: the spaces of the related area, the relationship with spaces, the environment, the services, for example, electrical, plumbing, sewage. You want to look into the fittings and the sort of finishes that you might have on the building, and the construction method, which one's the best for that area, what does the client want, if it can fit in. For example, if there's planning, you want to make sure that it's compliant with the planning. So there's a lot of things that you want to look into. But after you develop your brief, there are several things that can stem off that, which is you want to make a bubble diagram or a block diagram. As I said, I will do a video on this to show you guys how to dissect a brief and what comes after when you make the brief. So because there's a whole process on building, like there's a whole 1 to 7 RIBA stages, so I'll go more in depth in that later on. So as you can see, here are the things that I spoke about earlier: the scheme, program, area, dimensions, circulation, relationship of space, services, and the construction. Those are the main things that you want to look into when in the brief, and make sure that you take it in and you're giving the client the best service possible. The next thing that you want to look into when you're creating a concept is the narrative. It's like a story. You want your concept to have a story behind it. You want to make sure there's a theory behind your creation. There's a reason why. And some of the things that will help you is the 5 W's, which is what, when, where, why, and who. You might be thinking, why the 5 W's? The reason why we look into the 5 W's when creating a narrative for a concept is because you want to know what the building's going to be for. Like, you might be able to advise the customer why you might not need the building, or why you think the building... It's your opinion. You have to make sure that you take ownership when it's a building you're making. You have to take ownership. So what the building is for, who it's for. Is it for a company, for office buildings, or is it a home? You need to make sure you know who you're delivering. So you need to do your background on the actual... You have to do your background check on the actual client and see who the building is for. When is the building going to be made? The client will always have when they want the building to be made. Make a story about how long it's going to take. Like, if they want this building, like if it's possible to be made, everything. Where it's going to be, that's back to your site analysis when you're looking at where it's going to be, what sort of areas in, and why they want it made. That's the main question. Why do they want this building made? Is it because they're working in an office and they've got 500 employees and they think that the space is too small, so they want a new building what's bigger? But at the same time, is it the building that needs to be expanded, or is it the business that needs replanning because nothing's working? It's not always a building that can fix problems. Do you get what I'm saying? So you got to always look into it and kind of take ownership on what you're developing, because if you develop a meaningless building, that's on you. So you got to always make sure that you put in that, make sure there's a story behind why, because you've got to get it approved by the authorities. So you have to make sure you know why you're building this building. And the last thing that you want to look into is the complexity of your building. Complexity isn't about making it really complex. It has a deeper kind of meaning. It means your building has like multiple meanings behind it and depth. So, for example, people say less is more. So you kind of have to look into it as, if you're building a 3-bedroom house for a client, you got to make sure you know what the client wants. For number one, the brief, what the client wants. Number two, make sure there's a story behind why you're building the building that the client wants. So do your research, which links back to the site analysis. So you got to make sure that you're not building a 140 square foot building, 140,000 square foot building, which only has 3 bedrooms and a downstairs and upstairs. That's out of proportion. Do you get what I mean? So you need to make sure that you're taking into factor of what you're looking for. One good book to help understand this topic more is Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture by Robert Venturi. It's a very good book. I will put it in the description if any of you want to read it. But it will really help know and understand the complexity, because you don't want to build a 5-story industrial building for 5 men. You need to have a reason behind everything. So that building will help a lot. Today's tip of the day is SAD with 2 S's, which is start simple and develop. You don't want to start with this big crazy idea and then you're changing it halfway through. If you start small and develop an idea, it can't go wrong. So one of the tips to really go with is start simple and develop off of a simple idea. You don't want to just push yourself into the deep end, and there's no need to be in that deep end. You might be halfway. So you don't want to bite off more than you can actually chew. So make sure that you take this on board and you start simple and develop. But if you guys like this video, please like and subscribe, and tune in to next week's video, which will be posted on Tuesday at 6:30. Thank you, and I'm out.